In this video, we're going to turn Ableton into a multi-channel DAW, and we're going to do that in a way that is completely free and that will allow us to load regular multi-channel plugins into Ableton sessions. To show you what I mean, let's have a brief look at an Ableton session that uses this approach in order to implement a 16-channel audio track. So let's just press play. And on this audio track, that once again has 16 channels, I have a 16-channel version or a 16-channel instance of Cinematic Rooms Professional, which is a very highly respected reverb. And I can use this reverb just as if it would be a stereo reverb within Ableton. And I can use this track just as if it would be a regular stereo track. If this is something that interests you, stick around. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can actually do that. Once again, you can do that now and you can do that completely for free. It's a lot of fun, so let's get started. Before I hop into Ableton, let me first briefly talk about what exactly we need in order to make everything work. The first thing that we need is Envelop for Live, which is a set of Max for Live devices that allow Ableton users to work with Ambisonics audio. Now in this video, I'm actually not going to use Ambisonics audio. The only thing that I'm going to use is I'm going to use the capabilities of Envelop for Live to work with 16-channel audio. And we're going to repurpose these 16 channels in order to hold a regular surround sound format, like for example, a 9.1.6 format. Now, if you're interested in how to use Envelop for Live for its intended purpose, and that is to work with Ambisonics audio and Ableton Live, I'm going to leave a couple of links in the description below. I did a number of videos about that topic, and recently we also talked about the main developer of Envelop for Live, Mark Lee, on our audio podcast, Spatial Audio Monthly. Once again, links in the description below. If you're interested, I highly recommend checking those videos out. The second thing that we need is a set of Envelop for Live extensions that have been developed by Noah Neumark, who is an independent developer who does very, very cool things. In particular, we need the Envelop for Live VST loader, we need the head-tracked binaural Envelop for Live mod of Masterbus, and we need the Envelop for Live audio injector and the Envelop for Live VST loader MIDI version. All of those devices can be downloaded for free. Once again, links in the description below. One final thing before we get started, if you read through the Envelop for Live website, you will notice that Envelop for Live is officially only supported on Mac operating systems. However, it works on Windows just as fine. It's just that the developer of Envelop for Live doesn't have the resources to support a Windows version as well. But it is Max for Live, and Max for Live works on Windows as well as Macs. I'm going to use a Mac operating system today for reasons that become a little bit apparent later. However, if you work on Windows, just give it a try. And most likely it will work just as fine as on the Mac operating system that I'm going to use. And with that being said, let's open up Ableton. Now I'm going to work with an almost empty project today. The only thing that I did is I added an instance of Dune, and I added a very simple MIDI loop, and that MIDI loop is playing a one-finger preset of Dune. It's the init preset, so let's just have a brief listen how that sounds. So essentially, here's Dune. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add the Envelop for Live system, and for that we need to add two Max for Live devices that come with the Envelop for Live package. Wherever you've downloaded Envelop for Live, go to that folder, and in that folder there are really two things that we need. We need the source panner, and the source panner is responsible for panning the signal into three-dimensional space into an ambisonic signal, a 16-channel ambisonic signal. So this will essentially take whatever comes out of Dune and will turn that into an ambisonic signal, third-order ambisonics. Once again, we're not going to really use ambisonics, but just for the sake of completeness. And the second thing is we need to add the Masterbus device that essentially decodes the ambisonic signal back into stereo or whatever signal we want. And for that purpose, I'm going to simply put an Masterbus device on one of the return tracks. I can actually put it on any track as I like. The only track that I'm not allowed to put it on is the actual Masterbus, but any other audio track is fine, and I usually put it on a return track. So let's do that, and let's add the Masterbus device to our return track here, and that essentially will now take in the ambisonic signal that has been created by the source panner and turn that back into a binaural signal. In this particular case, I can choose what type of decoder I want to use. Once again, we're actually going to not use that for the rest of this video, but just for the sake of completeness. And what I have now is I have the audio signal sent into the source panner. I can pan that around in three-dimensional space. This then reaches the master bus device, and here you see the 16 channels of the ambisonic signal, and that is then back decoded into a binaural signal. Now there's one additional thing that we're going to do is, and that is sometimes you also want the ability to use buses, and in the Envelop for Life system you can actually do that with auxiliary send and auxiliary return devices. Usually if you're using Envelop for Life, what happens is that every penner that you're using is sending the audio signal directly into the master bus device. But once again, sometimes you actually want to have a little bit more flexibility and you want to have a busing system, and these two devices allow you to do that. So in order to get that going, what we need to do is we need to add the send device, the Envelop for Life auxiliary send device, to our track that holds tune. As you can see, it connected, the penner connected to the send device. We are sending into group A, so that's something that we can select here. And then I just need to add the return device wherever I want that bus to be processed. And I'm going to use the second I'm simply going to use the second return track here. So once again, let me just delete the reverb. We don't need that. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the aux return device and we're going to put that on this return track. And what's happening now is that the signal comes out of tune. It is panned through the source penner. It is going into the auxiliary send device. From the auxiliary send device, it's sent into group A. Group A is then routed to the auxiliary return that receives group A. And from here, it goes into the Envelop for Life master bus device. So let's just see if everything works correctly. And as we can see, it does. So once again, signal comes in, is panned, goes into the auxiliary send device, is sent into group A, comes in at the auxiliary return device, and is then forwarded to the master bus device. And the idea now is that you can use this return track or this bus track in order to add, for example, effects. So one thing that you could do, for example, is here after the auxiliary return device add, for example, a reverb. And that is a way to do that with Envelop for Life, is this send and return. And what we're doing here really is we're completely bypassing the routing system within Ableton for Life, and we have added a 16-channel routing system that is utilizing the capabilities of Max for Life, and that works actually pretty well. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to repurpose these capabilities of routing 16 channels through Max for Life within Ableton in order to turn Ableton almost into a multi-channel DAW. And we're going to use that in order to do regular surround sound, for example 9.1.6. But before I do that, let me remind you that if you find that video interesting, please consider subscribing, and also don't forget to press the like button. It really helps out the channel. And for those of you who have been watching me for quite some time, I now also have the option to become a member. So there are YouTube memberships and Patreon memberships. And if you're interested in the things that I do and you want to support me in the things that I do, please consider becoming a member. So let's hop back into Ableton, and the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the master bus device that comes with the Envelop for Life system, and I'm going to use the modified master bus device from Noah Neumark instead. This is technically not necessary, however, it will make things a little bit clearer, so I'm going to use the modified version of the master bus device instead. So I'm going to remove the master bus device here, and I'm going to replace that with the modified master bus device. You kind of take that from wherever you've downloaded it to. And this will essentially kind of do exactly the same thing. This is a master bus device, and we've used it in the past for head tracking. We're not really going to work with head tracking today, but once again, a couple of things are a little bit clearer in that particular device. So if I'm playing the audio now, it should work just fine through the modified master bus device. Now, the first thing that I want to do is something that actually started the entire question, if I can actually use Envelop for Life for something that goes a little bit beyond its actual capabilities. And that is, I want to replace the decoder that comes with the Envelop for Life system with my own decoder. So for example, I have a VST plugin that I would like to use. And the question was, can I use that decoder that comes as a VST plugin together with Envelop for Life? And in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to load a VST plugin into the signal chain within Envelop for Life, and that for that purpose we're going to use the VST loader device that Noah Neumark created. So, couple of things. First of all, I'm going to turn off the decoder in the modified master bus. So there's an option here that says no decoder. So I'm simply click on that. That essentially means that now there is really no decoder. The signal is passed through the master bus device in exactly the same way it comes. And then I'm going to go to the return track. That was sort of the bus that we used. And I'm going to add a VST loader device. And this VST loader device will hold the VST decoder that I'm going to use. So let's drop a VST loader device here. Now, the VST loader device is actually relatively straightforward. The idea is that you can load a VST plugin, a multi-channel VST plugin into this device. You can either do that by dropping the actual file into this field here, or you can click on the load button, which is what we're going to do in a second. It will then show you what type of plugin is loaded. I can open the user interface, and I will have access to some of the parameters of this plugin. This will happen automatically. It will select the first parameter that the VST plugin is exposing, but I will actually be able to change that. So in case you want to automate certain parameters, you can do that by using these 8 macros here. Now let's load a decoder, and the decoder that I'm going to use is going to be the Audio Brewers decoder. So let's load that up, and I'm going to use the VST3 version. Now, one of the things that you need to be aware when you're working with this system is that some of the plugins might work in certain plugin versions. So sometimes it will work with the VST3 version, sometimes it will work with the VST version, sometimes it will work with the audio unit version if you're on Mac operating systems. And that has to do with the fact that Max for Live does not necessarily completely understand how the channels are routed within the plugin. So you need to simply try out and see how what type of plugin or what plugin format you want to use. For the Audio Brewers decoder, I've already tried it out. We need to use the VST3 version, and I'm going to simply select the AB decoder higher order ambisonics, and I'm going to open that up. As soon as I've opened it up, the loader device has selected the first 8 parameters to be automatable. Once again, I can simply change the parameters that I want to automate by simply clicking on this little triangle here, and then I have the all these parameters exposed, and I can select which one I want to expose and use in this particular macro. We're not going to do that in this video, but just so that you know, I can open the user interface, and this user interface will essentially show me the AB decoder. It has recognized that it sits on a 16 channel track and is assuming that it receives a third order ambisonic signal, and it's turning that into a 16 channel surround signal, which is 9.1.6. This is the suggested format. If I want to change that to something else, I can do that. It works just fine. So let's just check if everything is working the way it should. So I should actually get 16 channels in, and then it should create 16 channel in 9.1.6 format. So let's just play audio. And as you can see, sort of the ambisonic signal is coming in, and it's converted into 16 channels. Right now, I'm only hearing the first 2 channels. So I'm only monitoring the first 2 channels, but we're going to fix that in a second. Now, the first thing that I started to notice once we had that device was that, hey, I now have a 9.1.6 signal. Wouldn't it be nice if I can just work with that 9.1.6 in a way like I would use in any digital audio workstation that can handle multi-channel? Can I, for example, add a 16-channel 9.1.6 reverb after that? And the answer to that question is yes, I can. And this is what we're going to do now. So let me just stop the audio for a second. And in order to do that, all I really need to do is I need to add an additional loader device after that one. And once again, if you're working with the Envelop for Live system, always make sure that the routing is correct. So if it's yellow here, that means that the audio is routed within the chain. If it's blue, that it means that it's routed to the bus or to the master bus device. And here we want to add a reverb. We're going to use a 16-channel reverb, and the one that we're going to use is going to be Cinematic Rooms. So once again, we're going to use the VST3 version. So here we have Cinematic Rooms Professional. So let's open that up. And then let's open the user interface. And as you can see, the system has recognized that I'm sitting on a 9.1.6 on a 16-channel track. And this is now receiving all 16 channels, and it's creating a 16-channel reverb. So let's just play the audio and see how that sounds. Let's open up the user interface again. And this is now a 16-channel 9.1.6 reverb that is completely within Ableton Live. And I can work with it just as if it would be a 16-channel track, which technically it is. It is a 16-channel track that is routed through Max for Live. And this by itself is already pretty cool. However, the question is, if I'm now actually interested in 9.1.6, why did I convert it into Ambisonics in the first place? Wouldn't it be nicer if I could just, kind of use the routing capabilities of Envelop for Live without even going into Ambisonics? And the answer to that question is yes, I can. And this is what we're going to do next. So let's go back into our Ableton project. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the track that essentially creates the audio. And what I want is I want the audio not to be converted into Ambisonics. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the source panner, that is the one that is responsible for converting the stereo signal into Ambisonics. And I'm going to use a different device that Noah Neumark created, the audio injector device. And what this audio injector device does is it simply takes the channels, the left and right channel, and it's sending them into two channels in the 16-channel version of the audio track. So you can send it into any of those. So by default, it is sent into channels 1 and 2, which are left and right channel. And that essentially means that now the audio is just kind of stereo in our 16-channel version of this audio track. Now, the second thing I need to do is in the aux return track, I now no longer need the decoder because I haven't encoded it in Ambisonics, and because it's not encoded in Ambisonics, I don't need the decoder either, so let's just delete that. So let me delete that. Let's make sure that there's a connection here. And what's happening now is that the audio is just sent into left and right channel. It is then essentially kind of sent into the first two channels of this 16-channel track. It is then routed into this bus, and in the bus it is hitting on Cinematic Rooms Professional, and that is then creating a 16-channel reverb. So let's just see how that works, and let me just double check if the routing is correct, because I think yes. So the audio injector here is not routing into the aux send, so what I need to do is I need to click on that in order to make that yellow, and once that is yellow it is sent. And now let's just play. So the audio is now coming in at channels 1 and 2. It is sent in channels 1 and 2. It goes into the bus. In the bus, it's hitting Cinematic Rooms, and Cinematic Rooms is turning the signal that is coming in at the front channels into a 16-channel track. And once again, we can work with that reverb in the same way we would normally work with a reverb. Now, obviously, that is a little unsatisfactory because I want to actually kind of first pan that signal in three-dimensional space. So if I'm working with 9.1.6, I want to add a panner that can actually pan the audio in a 9.1.6 format. And currently, I don't do that. I just send the left and right channel into the 16 channels, and that's really everything that I do. But I can very easily just add a panner now, and the way to do that is very obvious. So we're going to go back into our little track that holds tune. And what I'm going to do now is once the audio has hit the 16-channel Envelop for Live system, I'm simply going to add another VST loader device, going to set that between the audio injector device and the aux send. Once again, make sure that everything is connected. So let's click on here in order to have that in the chain. And then I'm going to load a panning device into this VST loader device. So let's just load one. And what I'm going to do first, and we will see in a second that actually doesn't really completely work. So let's use Novonode's 3DX. It's one of my favorite panners. You can use any panner that you want. It just needs to be a panner that can essentially pan into 9.1.6. So let's just open that up. And let's essentially have, if you open up the UI user interface. With Novonode's 3DX, what you need to do, you always need to specify exactly what signal is coming in and what signal is going out. So here we have a stereo signal coming in, and we want to have a signal, a multi-channel signal going out. Now, unfortunately, Novonodes cannot do 9.1.6. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a 7.1.2, because why not, right? So let's use that one. And that should now essentially turn the stereo signal into a 7.1.2, and I can use Novonodes in order to do the panning. So let's just see how that works, or if that works, and we will see in a second that there's actually a little bit of a problem here. So let's just do that. Now, as we see, the channels are essentially created, but they are not sent correctly into the or they are not really forwarded correctly in the Envelop for Life system. And this is a problem that you quite often have with VST3 plugins. The way VST3 plugins interact with Max for Life is sometimes a little wonky. My recommendation is to simply try out if the VST3 version works, and if the VST3 version does not work, just kind of use one of the other plugin formats that you can use. And in all likelihood, that will then work. And if it doesn't, there's actually an additional option that we're going to kind of go over in a second. But what I'm going to do here is I'm simply going to replace the plugin. So let me just close that and let's unload that plugin. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually replace that with the audio unit version. And as we will see, the audio unit version actually works just fine. So we're going to use the component instead. Let's open up the component. Once again, we need to set the input and output signals to stereo is coming in, and we said that we would switch that to 7.1.2. So that's essentially going out. And then let's see if that works correctly. And as you can see in the audio unit version, the channels are now forwarded correctly. So this is the first 10 channels. Once again, Tune is playing a stereo signal. The stereo signal is injected into the 16-channel Envelop for Life system in channels 1 and 2. Then I have a VST plugin, which is 3DX in audio unit format that is converting that or panning that into 7.1.2. That is then going through the auxiliary send into the bus. And in the bus, it is hitting cinematic rooms. Cinematic rooms is now receiving that correctly. It's not taking in the white signal, the white channels, because they don't exist, but everything else is set correctly. And then essentially it can once again work with cinematic rooms in the way I would normally work with cinematic rooms. And from there it is forwarded to the master bus device, and it's essentially received here in the master bus device. And currently, once again, and we're going to fix that in a second, I'm only hearing the first 2 channels. Now I could obviously add a banal decoder, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going actually to do something completely different. I'm going to add the Dolby Atmos renderer towards the end of this video. Now in this setup there's one little problem, and this little problem is that because cinematic rooms recognize that it sits on a 16-channel track, it automatically configured itself to be a 9.1.6. However, the signal that's going in is a 7.1.2, and that essentially means that it's not matching completely. It would be much nicer if I could switch cinematic rooms into 7.1.2 mode. So if I could, for example, go into the plugin interface, and I can simply switch that to 7.1.2. But unfortunately, Cinematic Rooms does not allow you to do that. And because it sits on a 16-channel track, it automatically kind of assumed that it is 9.1.6. So what do we do if we arrive at a situation like that, where essentially the Max for Life is and the plugin are not really working correctly? And there's also no way for me to switch the plugin format in order to make that work. It will always recognize the channel or the track to be a 9.1.6 track. Now, one thing that you can do is you can use a separate plugin host within the VST loader device. And what we are going to do here is we're going to use Plug Bidule for that purpose. So instead of loading Cinematic Rooms directly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load Bidule, and I'm going to add Cinematic Rooms in a 10-channel version to Plug Bidule in order to make sure that Cinematic Rooms is actually acting on a 7.1.2 signal. So first thing that I do is I'm going to unload Cinematic Rooms. And then I'm going to load Plug Bidule. Now with Plug Bidule on a Mac, there are a couple of things that you need to be aware. It comes in VST3 audio unit and VST versions. However, the VST3 version doesn't really work particularly well. And most of the time it actually crashes for some reason. Ableton, the audio unit version doesn't really work completely as well. So for Plug Bidule, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use let me just close that here. I'm going to use the VST version of Plug Bidule, which is, where do we have it? Here we have it, Bidule FX16. So I'm going to load that into our VST loader. I'm going to open up the user interface. Once again, it recognized that it is on a 16-channel track. And what I'm going to do now is, let me just remove the mixer here. I'm going to load in the cinematic rooms, and I'm going to do that as a VST3 in a 10-channel version. So I'm going to go to Liquid Sonic, Cinematic Rooms Professional, and what I want is I want the 10-channel in, 10-channel out version of Cinematic Rooms. So I'm going to select that one here. And that then essentially kind of makes sure that Cinematic Rooms is now assuming that it sits on a 7.1.2 track. So let's connect the inputs and outputs of Dolby Dual with the inputs and outputs of the Cinematic Rooms plugin within Dual. Now this is a little bit fiddly, unfortunately, but that's what we have to do. So let's connect the 10 inputs here, and then let's do the same for the outputs. That now essentially kind of moves the audio from the input, the first 10 I used, into Cinematic Rooms, into the outputs of Dolby Dual. And if we open up Cinematic Rooms, we will see that Cinematic Rooms has actually recognized that it sits on a 10-channel track. So it's now in 7.1.2 mode, and everything should just work perfectly fine, or at least in the way we intend it to be working. So let's just play the audio. And as you can see, essentially the audio is recognized correctly as a 10-channel audio. And it's now kind of sending only 10 channels, and that's going into the master bus device. And these channels are now received. So now I have a 7.1.2 track, but I'm really only monitoring the first 2 channels so far. So I'm actually kind of not taking advantage of all 10 channels at that point. So what do I do in order to kind of make that really useful, or really kind of work with all 10 channels? Now there are a couple of options that I have. The first thing that I can do is obviously I can add a decoder to my plugin chain that kind of scales that down from 7.1.2 back to stereo or binaural. I can do that with the VST loader device, or I can also do that within the master bus device. If you click on the decoder option here, you essentially will see that there is this additional option, binaural VST, and what that really does is it allows you to load in a VST decoder into the master bus device. This only exists for the modified master bus device from Noah Neumark, and it's actually pretty nice. Problem with that is that it doesn't really work for all decoders. So there's something that's a little icky about those things. Noah is currently in contact with Cycling 74. There seem to be some issues with Max for Life. For some decoder it works, but beware, it doesn't work for all decoders. The other thing that you can do is you can export that as in 7.1.2 format. And the way to do that is by simply using the export function that comes with the master bus device. So you have this little record button here. And if you press this record button, it allows you to select a file. And if I select a file, for example, here I've selected send.eiff. And if I say save, it will then save the audio into that particular file. And if I then press play, it will essentially kind of record everything. So that's the other option that you can do by simply kind of utilizing the record function within the master bus device. So let me just kind of turn it off again. And the third option is, and that is something that, for example, if you're working with Dolby Atmos, you can use an external renderer. So one thing that you can use, for example, is the external Dolby Atmos renderer. We do have a 7.1.2 track, and 7.1.2 is essentially an Atmos bed. So let's just use this track as an Atmos bed, and that's actually, as we will see, very, very simple to do. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load the Dolby Atmos renderer. So let me go to the Dolby Atmos renderer here, open that up. Here we have the renderer. Let's just make sure that everything is set correctly in the preferences. I just want to make sure that I'm receiving the Dolby Audio Bridge. So this, once again, only works for Mac operating system. So if you're on Windows, unfortunately, you can't do it that way. But you probably can do kind of a different approach, kind of working with different types of renderers. But if you want to use the Dolby Atmos renderer, you have to have a Mac operating system. So the input is set to the Dolby Audio Bridge, and the output is set to the Rodecaster, so that you can actually hear what I'm doing here. So that is working correctly. And then I also need to go into live, and in live, in the settings, I need to go into the output settings, and I need to switch that over to the Dolby Audio Bridge, and that will make sure that the audio is now sent into the Dolby Atmos renderer. So if I'm now playing the audio, you shouldn't hear any difference, but the signal is now routed differently. It is going from, once again, from Dune into the injector device, then it's going to be panned in 3D into 7.1.2, goes into the aux return. Here we have the cinematic rooms in 7.1.2, hosted within Dolby Dual, and it is then forwarded into the master bus device, and here essentially the first 2 channels is sent out into the Dolby Audio Bridge. So if I'm opening the Dolby Atmos renderer now, I see that the first 2 channels are reaching the Dolby Atmos renderer. But I don't only want to have the first 2 channels, I actually want to have all 10 channels, and that is now very, very simple to do. The first thing I need to do is I need to switch off the monitoring option. I need to set up the outputs directly. So I'm going to send the first 2 channels to channels 1, 2 in the Dolby Audio Bridge, the second 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 10. And that essentially now takes all 10 channels. So if I'm now playing the audio, you can already hear that I have a much more immersive experience, because now all 10 channels are routed into the Dolby Audio Bridge, and if I'm opening up the Dolby Atmos renderer, I see that all 10 channels are reaching the Dolby Atmos renderer. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because I now can route all kinds of multi-channel tracks into the Dolby Atmos renderer. One thing I can do, for example, is I can do a 9.1.6 track and use that as a object bed track, which essentially means that it's not routed into the bed channels of the Dolby Atmos renderer. It's routed into the object channels, but we are actually using it as a bed. If you're interested in me showing you how to do that, let me know and I can create a video about that. It's actually really neat and very, very convenient, and works extremely well with that particular setup. And as you've seen, the setup is actually very straightforward, and it almost works as if Ableton would be a multi-channel DAW. But I want to close this video with something completely different, and that has to do with the instrument that we actually used in order to create that audio signal. We're currently using Dune, and that is a stereo instrument, and that works just fine. But what if you have a multi-channel instrument, like Skydust 3D, for example, that can create 7.1.2? How do I do that? And the answer to that is very, very simple, with another Envelop for Live device by Noah Neumark. So let's open up the instrument track, and the way it's currently routed is that I have Dune that creates the stereo signal. The stereo signal once again is sent into the first 2 channels of the Envelop for Live system, and then it is essentially panned with the 3DX panner. And what I want to do is I want to replace these 3 devices with one multi-channel instrument, and I'm going to use the Envelop for Live VST loader MIDI version for that purpose. So let me just delete the panner here. I don't need that anymore. Let me delete the audio injector, I don't need that either, and let me delete Dune. And what I'm going to do is, instead of using an instrument within Ableton, I'm actually going to use an instrument within the Envelop for Live system directly. And for that purpose, I'm going to use the Envelop for Live VST3 loader MIDI device. And this device works exactly the same way as the effects version. The only difference is that it's now an instrument, and instead of loading an effect, I'm going to load an instrument. So let's load Skydust 3D, and let me just kind of open up Skydust 3D. I'm going to use, what version am I going to use? I think the one that works is the VST3 version, so let me just open up Skydust 3D. Where is it? Skydust 3D. And here we are. So let's open that up. And let's open up the user interface. Takes a little bit to essentially kind of come up. So let's open up the user interface. I'm going to use the Stars of the Night sequence as the preset. And I also need to select what format I want to have. And I want to actually output that into 7.1.2. Where are we? Here we are. And that should now create a 7.1.2 signal, and let's play that. And once again, I need to reconnect the device with the auxiliary send. As I can see, the Skydust 3D is now creating a 7.1.2 signal directly. This 7.1.2 signal is sent into the auxiliary send. From there it goes into the return track. It's going through the cinematic rooms version, and in the cinematic rooms version we have essentially kind of hosted that within Bidul in order to make sure that we can actually use the 10-channel version of cinematic rooms. Here I can use the reverb in the way I want to. From there it is sent into the master device, and from here it's forwarded into the Dolby Atmos renderer. And everything works just fine. And that's how you can use multi-channel instruments within Ableton for Live in full multi-channel glory. And that allows us to use Ableton almost as a fully functional multi-channel DAW. Now, a couple of caveats. The first thing that you might have noticed is there's one thing that is still missing, and that is that we don't have sidechaining capabilities. However, all the devices that we use are open source, so if you want to extend on those in order to integrate sidechaining into the system, you can definitely do that. It shouldn't be all that difficult to do. The second thing is, as we've already seen, Max for Live has some issues with multi-channel VST plugins. That is, some of these things are very, very particular to Max for Live. Some of them are a little bit more of a result of the inconsistencies in the VST3 specifications. So you might need to test if the plugin that you want to use actually works correctly. Always make sure that you test everything to make sure that all the channels are reaching the Dolby Atmos renderer or whatever renderer you're using in exactly the way they're supposed to reach it. But other than that, that's really everything I wanted to say today. Thanks again for watching my videos. If you have any questions or comments, please use the comment section below. Also, please don't forget to press the like button, subscribe to this channel. If you find these videos interesting, please also consider becoming a member, either through the YouTube membership or through the Patreon membership. And with that being said, see you at the next video.